want to welcome you to Spruce Hills Community Church. My name is Isaiah. I'm the lead pastor. And one of the things we always say here is welcome home. And we believe that as soon as you walk through the doors, you are home. No matter where you've come from, no matter how long you've been away, no matter what, welcome home. And just in a couple moments, worship team's going to come back. I'm calling you back already. No, in a couple moments, they're going to come back. And we're going to bring our kids back, and then we're actually going to have a huge celebration. I believe there's confetti. So, I'm really looking forward to that. And we did this once before. We had confetti, and we did it in the middle of the service, and we realized that there was, a huge mess here, and we didn't really think about that. So, in hindsight, we're going to do that on the end, so something to look forward to. But I get to take a couple moments and honestly do something that gives me one of the most joyous things that I get to do in my life. I have to be careful saying that because my wife and kids are here and they're the joy of my life. But this is also the joy of my life. And I get to share the story of what we've been singing about for the last few moments. And I'm not going to take long today. I'm not going to try and make this story complicated or make it sound good or do anything special other than share the story of what Easter means to me, what it means to us. I was once in a setting with some students, and I love asking students the question of what does it mean for you? Actually, I love asking kids the question because a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, they get it really right. They can be 4 years old, 5 years old, they're like, Jesus died on the cross for my sins, and he rose again. But it seems like teenagers regress as they get older. Any parents of teenagers with me this morning on that one? See a few hands, right? And so we were with some students, and the question was asked, what does Easter mean to you? And one student said, Easter, the time that Jesus lied to us all. And it was in church. And I just usually ask them to explain themselves because you don't know where their mind is. I was a teenager once, my mind's sort of still there, so I sort of have an idea of where that's to. He said, well, Jesus, he said he would die and rise again in 3 days, but according to my math, it's only been 2. He died on a Friday, he was dead on Saturday, and then he rose again on Sunday. That's not 3 days. And I also shared in that concern for a lot of my life. It doesn't make sense. It was only 2 days. It wasn't 3 days. What does Easter mean to you? As I prepared to share this message this morning, I really just felt deeply to share a word of good news for those who don't feel the joy or the victory or the celebration that some of us feel in this room this morning. I felt to share a message for those who still feel the weight of pain and sin and death and brokenness and defeat that exists in this world. And I want you to know today, very simply, that Easter is for you. And I woke up this morning, and after I snoozed my alarm 7 times, I love being up before the sunrise on Easter morning. I don't know why. And I love just reading the story where it says at the break of dawn, everything went down. And so I try to get up when it's still dark, which is a little easier. I don't know. I've just been in a season lately where it's easier to hit snooze. Might have something to do with kids and whatnot, and a dog and all those things. But anyways, I got up this morning, it was dark, and I could see that the light was starting to, the sun was starting to rise, it was starting to get light up, and I had this expectation, I know what's going to happen. Or at least I knew what happened 2,000 years. I know as I got up this morning that something is different about this day. But every single year as I read this story, I realize that that's not how they woke up. They did not wake up thinking, I better get to the tomb and watch, the stone's going to go poof, and he's going to come out, and it's going to be amazing. It's not what we see as we read the story. And so I want to look at that story for a few moments this morning. I'm going to read a little bit from Matthew chapter 27, last few verses, in the moments where they lay Jesus in the tomb. And Matthew, the gospel writer, he writes this. He says, the next day after Friday, that is after the day of preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered before Pilate, the governor, the emperor, and said, Sir, we remember how that impostor, Jesus, said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away, and tell the people he has risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first. And Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by stealing the stone and setting the guard. It's funny, the chief priests, the religious people of the day, they go to Pilate, who would have at his disposal guards and soldiers. They go to him and they make him secure this tomb as secure as possible, because the religious people, not those following Jesus, not those on his side, they were most fearful that it was actually going to be true, that he was going to rise again. And as you read the story, we see nothing about the disciples into this moment. What Matthew, the guy who writes the story, is doing as he writes the biography, the story of Jesus' life, is he sort of explains each move in the narrative, almost anticipating where our minds would go as we read it next. He also writes this story in defense to some of the objections to the resurrection of Jesus that were already circulating about the time he writes, about 30 years after Jesus had died and been raised back to life. Matthew tells us, as we just read, that it was actually the chief priests, the religious rulers, and the Pharisees who were most concerned that it was actually going to happen. It was going to be true. He was going to rise just like he said. I love what they call him. They said the imposter. He said that when he was still alive, he was going to rise again, showing that they actually believed that this was going to happen, that he would rise again. And so they said to themselves, what do we do about this? What do we do? And so they go to those who have soldiers and all those things, and they say, well, let's secure the tomb until then. Because if we don't, here's their concern, if we don't, the disciples, they might steal his body and try to convince us all that he rose again. There's some common objections we see in people who doubt the resurrection of Jesus, if he died and rose again. Some of those objections include he wasn't really dead. So, some say that maybe they stole his body, which is what we see Matthew is talking about here. Some say that, as we will read in a moment, it's the women who go to the tomb. Some say they went to the wrong tomb. Now, my wife's not here, so I can do this. I can understand a bit of this argument. And I'm not making a statement about all women, so don't throw stones this morning. But I know that if it was my wife, I wouldn't be shocked if she went to the wrong tomb. Now you got a secret. That's between us. She's out there somewhere parenting. Let me do this. But some say, well, they went to the wrong tomb. That's what happened. But right before this, we see in Matthew's gospel, he actually clarifies a couple of things. He says, one, it was a new tomb. At this point in time, lots of people would share tombs where they would be buried. But he says it was a new tomb. But he also notes that it was sealed with a large stone, and that the women were there in the night in which Jesus was laid there. So if they had been there once before, even my wife would probably be able to get back there the second time. Okay? That's what he's sort of saying here. And I know it's hard for us to wrap our minds around, because we don't bury the dead in this kind of way. There's caskets or there's cremation, but in this time the bodies would be laid wrapped with a cloth. They would be anointed with spices and perfume, and the body would lay on a shelf or a ledge in a tomb, in a cave. I read this week, sometimes under a house, which is really, really creepy. And when all the flesh would decompose, friends or relatives would collect the bones, put them in a box, wrap them that neatly, and then secure them. So sometimes, as Matthew says, there were several bodies in the same tomb, but this is why he says, no, it was a new tomb. Like, you can't confuse the story. Like, there was no one else in this tomb. Jesus was breaking this one in. It was all his. Seen a joke this week. Joseph of Arimathea, who actually, it's his tomb, and he took Jesus from Pilate. He said, "Can I put Jesus in the tomb?" And Joseph was known to be a rich man. They said, "Well, why would you put him in your tomb? Like, you just paid for this and it's really expensive." And he's like, "Well, it's only for 3 days. Like, it's only borrowing it. It's only renting it." Like Joseph, like the OG Airbnb host, right? Just like, it's only gonna be 3 days, so just, it's all good. This one always surprises me, but apparently grave robbery was common in this time, or at least the misplacing of bones. I don't know why, but that's why there's significance, again, upon the fact that the tomb is not just sealed with a stone, it's also sealed with protection of Roman guards. They were not letting any story come out of this that could possibly be true. They wanted Jesus dead. They got that. and they wanted him to remain dead. And they didn't want any kind of story trying to convince us otherwise. So some say, well, maybe he actually wasn't dead. That's a common objection, but Pilate never would have given over Jesus' body if he actually wasn't dead. Some object, well, they stole his body. But notice how in this story, we actually haven't encountered Jesus' disciples yet. Why haven't we encountered them yet? His core 12, his all-star team, why haven't we encountered them yet? Well, they're already down to 11 because Judas is betrayed. Probably down to 10 because Peter's in some corner hiding and crying after he denied Jesus 3 times and a rooster crows and all that goes down. But what we know of the disciples, although there's hardly anything we see of them, is that they were likely in hiding, fearing for their lives. Stealing his body was the last thing on their minds. They were thinking in this moment, we're next. We were with this guy. We supported his message. We were with him. Maybe we're next. And so there's zero evidence, even when you read the story, that they go to the tomb or they had any kind of idea that it was actually going to be true. Even though in Matthew's gospel alone, Jesus says, I will die and rise again 3 times. His enemies remember what his disciples forget. Jesus' enemies remember what his disciples don't forget. Who doesn't forget? The chief priests, the Pharisees. So the tomb is guarded. Maximum security. The tomb is guarded. And I realized this morning that none of this proves anything. It doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't force you to say, okay, I really believe that it's true now. It just helps us think through some of the objections. Here's what I've realized which is true about the Christian faith. There is always room for doubt. There's always room for doubt. And Matthew, as he's writing this story, he's very aware of this. And I think Matthew wants us to know that our faith is historically based with credible evidence that God has entered history and changed it forever through the person of Jesus. And so what Matthew does is he does absolutely everything possible to make sure that if we're going to doubt, our doubt is located in the right place. There's room for a lot of confusion with some of the counter arguments. But what Matthew wants us for us to boil it down to is this. The question is this: is there a God? And could or would he do this? Forget all the side arguments and side. Matthew wants us to ask this question: is there a God? And if there is, would or could he have done this? What happened that morning? We read in Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. This is what Matthew says next. Now after the Sabbath, that's a religious day where they practiced holiness by resting toward the dawn of the first. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, which would be Sunday. Sabbath was Friday, sundown, until Saturday, sundown. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen as he said. I love this next part. Here's the invitation. Come see the place where he lay. Come and see the place where he lay with your own eyes. But then he says, then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee, and there you will see him. See that I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, what up? He didn't say that. He said, greetings. Very proper, you know. Greetings. That's what we should say. We shouldn't say welcome home. We should say greetings. Greetings. And they came up and they took hold of his feet and they worshiped him. And then Jesus said to them again, do not be afraid. You can see the fear in the story. He says to them 3 times, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. The women reached the tomb, and they're gripped with a mix of terror and joy. They don't go expecting a resurrection. They didn't wake up like me, just like really tired, trying to make coffee. I got to get to the grave because he's going to rise. I got to get there. Extra shot of espresso on the way. We see in Mark 16:3, it says they asked each other, here's their primary concern, who will roll the stone away? Who's going to move the stone? Why? So that we can get in and anoint his body for burial with the spices and the perfume. They actually go, it says, after the Sabbath, Friday sundown till Saturday sundown. Then it's too dark. They didn't have flashlights on their phones, so they couldn't go Saturday night. They go Sunday morning to give Jesus a proper burial. They did not go in expecting him to rise. They did not go expecting him to rise. Because of the events Friday, the Sabbath, and all those things, they didn't get a chance. They did not go in expecting a resurrection. They also would have went just to spend time with the body. How many know when you sometimes... He'll be all right. He's all right. That's okay. They also would have went and they would have just liked to sit with the body. It's common in Jewish tradition, they say that sometimes families sit for as much as 7 days just with the body as a way of allowing grief to take its place and to deal with the grief. That's all they expected. Matthew tells us this story in the most kind of dramatic way possible with signs and angels coming from his Jewish background, where the angels always show up for the big moments. But the angel extends an invitation to them. Come and see. Right before he says, I know you were looking for the Jesus who was crucified, but he's no longer not just crucified, but he's not here, he is risen. Come and see. And that's the invitation. Come and see. That's the invitation I want to give to you today. Come and see and encounter not just the Jesus who was crucified, but the Jesus who was risen. Come and see the God who remained apparently silent on Friday and Saturday is having the last word on a Sunday. Come and see the God who hasn't just done something special, some miracle, some miraculous thing, one-off, but that God is actually starting something new. Come and see that God is beginning something new through Jesus. Come and see that God was springing new life through the one whom death itself is defeated. Come and see. And then I love how come and see quickly becomes go and tell. And still when they encounter the risen Jesus moments later, his first word to them is still this: do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. We can imagine how they're feeling in that moment. What about the guards? What about the chief priests? What about all that stuff? What about Pilate? We read next, it says, while they were going, behold, some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that taken place. And when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel, they gave a sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, tell people his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among Jews to this day. That is up to 30 years in the time which he is ready. The soldiers, they have to conspire because as a Roman soldier, if this happened to you, if you failed in duty, it was an offense punishable by death. Which is why they don't go to their superiors, they go to the chief priests. And what about the disciples? We haven't read about those. We haven't read about those people yet. We haven't heard from them. All it says next in the next two verses is now the 11 disciples, they went to Galilee, to the mount to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, hear this, they worshipped him, but some, here it is again, doubted. Some doubted. Some worshipped, but some doubted. The same will be true today. And I want to add this. We sometimes get sidetracked to the benefits of following Jesus. And we say things all the time like, Jesus was a healer, and Jesus was a teacher, and Jesus was a prophet. And if you follow Jesus, you will experience this. If you follow Jesus, you will experience joy. If you follow Jesus, you will experience grace. If you follow Jesus, you will experience life. But the only claim that the early church made was this: Jesus rose from the dead. That's the only thing they talked about. Jesus rose from the dead. And why is that? Why do we sing about that today? Why do I talk about this today? Because we believe this changes everything. And very simply this morning, I don't want you to miss that we believe that the risen Jesus dispels any darkness, any fear of death in this life, and all the wearisome burden of sin, pain, and sorrow in which we go through in this life. We still experience that, but not in the same way. And we just don't have hope. We have living hope, as the song says a moment ago. We believe that we are no longer in our sin because Jesus died in our place, and when he defeated sin, he also defeated death. We believe that the resurrection life that Jesus offers fulfills the deepest hopes of the human heart, and that there is hope not just in this world but beyond this life. And the best evidence of the resurrection It's not just trying to make it sound great and tell a good story. The best evidence of a resurrection is the lives of people who say they believe in this, and therefore their lives are transformed. See, I get this weird privilege of sort of getting a front row seat to people's transformation. And I've seen too much in my life to know that this is something that is real, because I see the transformation that takes place in people's lives. I wish you could see me 10 years ago. Actually, I was actually being a pretty good Christian 10 years ago. Maybe 15 years ago. I'm kidding. I wish you could see my life. As a kid. As a teenager. As a young adult. Am I still a young adult? I think I am. Trying to follow Jesus. With so many questions. So many hurts. So many things that this doesn't mean, wrestling through the journey of what it means to follow Jesus, yet knowing there's brokenness in my life I'm still trying to deal with. There's imperfection in my life I'm still trying to navigate. And I don't qualify to be up here this morning any more than anyone else does. But I believe that Jesus died and rose again in my place, and he's not only defeated the sin that exists in my life, he's defeated death itself. And I have hope beyond this life. I get to watch people live this out. And if you're here in the room this morning, this can be true in your life. I know a God who can rewrite your story. I know a God who can define and redefine who you are or what you think you are, or anything in this world. And why am I so convinced about that? Not just my own experience, not just through the experience through I see in other people's lives, but as I read this, I see what happened in the lives of those who denied Jesus and feared everything that happened in this moment. What about the disciples? What do we know of their lives? Did they steal his body? Well, it's really strange for me if they'd be willing to be tortured and be willing to be killed if for a lie. What we see in their lives is they become willing to die because of their belief. Not that Jesus was amazing and that he did all these things for them, but they become willing to die because they believe that Jesus defeated death. Why would they be willing to do this? And I want to challenge those of us in the room who follow Jesus. Someone has said it this way. This is not an Isaiah quote. This is a really good quote I read this week. Sometimes we get caught up in this, right? Trying to defend and trying to understand why people don't see the world the same way we do and understand why they don't believe the same things we believe. But here's the greatest challenge this morning of what the resurrection means for our lives. Someone said this: there's no point defending or explaining God's new world if you're still living in the old one yourself. There's no point defending or explaining God's new world if you're still living in the old one yourself. What world do you live in today? Not just the physical world. Even for me in my own life, what world do I live in today? What world am I trying to defend or explain? Or am I just living in the new life in which Jesus provides for me? I think there's a lot at stake. Someone has said this: the essential consequences of the resurrection are incomparable. It is the concrete, factual, empirical proof that life has hope and meaning. Love is stronger than death. Goodness and power are ultimate allies, not enemies. Life wins in the end. God has touched us right here where we are and has defeated our last enemy. We are not cosmic orphans as our worldview would make us, and these essential consequences of the resurrection can be seen by comparing the disciples before and after. Before, they ran away. They defied their master and huddled behind locked doors in fear and confusion. After, they were transformed from, I don't know why he said this, but I love it, scared rabbits into confident saints. That's something you can go talk about all week. Scared rabbits into confident saints. World-changing missionaries. Courageous martyrs and joyful touring ambassadors for Christ. The greatest importance of the resurrection is not in the past, Christ rose, but in the present, Christ is risen. The angel at the tomb asked the women, "Why do you seek the living among the dead?" The same question could be asked today to historians and scholars. If we only keep Christ mummified in a casket labeled history or apologetics to the defense of the Christian faith, he would set our lives and our world afire as powerfully as he did 2,000 years ago, and our empire would sit up, take notice, rub its eyes, wonder, and convert a second time. That is the essential import of the resurrection. This is, again, we've been talking about this a lot as a church lately, why Paul prays in Ephesians 1, verses 18 through 21. Greg and team, you guys can come back. This has been my prayer for weeks now. was talking to someone this morning. This has been our prayer as a church. This has been the prayer. This is going to be the prayer for the next few weeks. You come back next week, we're going to talk about it again. Ephesians 1, verses 18 through 21. This is what the Apostle Paul prays. He prays this prayer writing to a bunch of young Christians, probably uncertain in what they believe, going through a bunch of different storms in their lives. This is what he prays. I pray that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, opened, in order that you may know the hope to which God has called you, the riches of his glorious inheritance in his holy people. In other words, God has poured out all his riches through Christ Jesus into our lives. And he looks at us and he says, you are the most valuable thing that I have in the entire world. Thirdly, that we would know his incomparably great power for us who believe. As we believe in this news today, as we believe that Jesus not only died, but he was raised back to life, we experience a power that is beyond our comprehension and our imagination, and it doesn't make sense. Faith and belief means it don't make sense. I have to place my trust in something. I have to place my faith in something. That we would know his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above every rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is invoked, not only in this present age, but also in the one to come. Pray that our eyes, the eyes of our hearts, not just the eyes of our heads, but the eyes of our hearts would be opened to know the power of Christ. And as I've said numerous times over the last few weeks, and as I continue to live this journey as a young adult, I realize life doesn't get easier. Life doesn't get easier. It does not get easier. If you're here this morning, you're younger than me, which is like not a lot of people, because I'm only a kid. Whenever I say things like that, I don't mean it in a bad way. Everyone, all the people who are more senior than me go, oh, he's making fun of me again because I'm old. That's not what I'm doing. I just mean I'm really young, okay? Really, really young. But as I get older, I'm going to be 30 in a couple years, you guys. I realize life doesn't get easier. Somehow, faith and trust does as I journey on this journey, which sometimes it feels like it takes a lot of effort on my end, but at the same time it doesn't, because God pours out his grace and mercy into my life and he gives me strength beyond what I can imagine. But I realize the best news ever, there is hope beyond anything in this life. And if I could just give that away for the rest of my life is all I want to do. And that at the same time, I would guard my heart to continually be open to that truth and that hope. And be open and say, okay, yeah, God, I'm going to trust you with that. It doesn't make sense right now. There's a lot of days it don't make sense right now, but I'm going to trust you with this. I'm going to give you a couple of moments as we just think about this morning. And before we bring the kids back in, someone can go get the kids. Whoever wants to go get the kids. Not everyone. Someone can go get the kids. We're going to bring them back. And I'm going to tell you why before we do this, and you might do this again later. There's a reason why we're going to have this big moment with our kids. It's because we want them to realize that this day is a day of celebration for them and for us. It's not an adult thing. It's a kid thing. And we want them to experience the hope. I hear stories all the time, and I know it's true because I have a 3-year-old, and he's a bit crazy, you know. But parents of toddlers can only say, when they pull into our church parking lot, the kids scream. That's the best thing ever. I wish as adults, that's what you did this morning, wasn't it? You came in here screaming, woo, can't wait. So maybe the confetti will help us this morning too, to realize that this is the best news ever, and it changes everything. Would you stand with us as we sing about this for a couple of moments?
How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope.
And hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living. Let's just sing that chorus just a couple more times. Oh, and hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Jesus Christ, my living hope. So I'm just going to ask band to keep playing over that for just a moment. So we're going to do something really, really fun. And like Pastor Isaiah already said, we love our kids so much. And we want them to remember this moment as not just a typical thing that we do just because it's another Sunday in the calendar, not because it's a government holiday. It's because we genuinely want to celebrate that Jesus rose from the dead. And when we are kids, we want to give them the memory that this is a morning of celebration. And so as the kids are coming in, kids should be coming in from KidsNet in just a moment as well. Hopefully they're making their way. So we're going to have confetti poppers. So every kid is going to get one. Parents, if you want to stick like kind of towards the edges, just in case they have a hard time. But in just a moment, we're going to sing a song called Happy Day. And it's an incredibly exciting song. It's full of energy. It has incredible words. But I'm going to ask every kid that's coming in, you can come to the front. And I'm going to give you direction. All the kids, come right up here. Right up to the front of the stage. Come on up, come on up. All right, so we're going to get the confetti poppers. And just so everybody knows, this is absolute organized chaos. And that's okay. We're going to roll with it. We're going to roll with it. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to sing a song called Happy Day. I'm going to you guys go all in. Can you guys dance for me? First of all, let's do a stretch. Everybody stretch up. Everybody stretch this way. Oh, stretch up, stretch this way. Do a little jump. Another jump, please. All right, we're all warmed up. Are we ready to go? So this is what we're going to do. So we're going to sing a song called Happy Day. When you hear us sing He's Alive for the first time, and I'll say, He's alive. Everybody say, He's alive.
He's alive.
When we do that, those confetti poppers are going to go, and we're just going to dance. And we're going to have all the fun in the world. Are we ready? All right, we're going to get this started. Jeremy's going to count us in, and we're going to have all the fun in the world. We're going to celebrate that Jesus is alive. So when you hear He's alive, watch those poppers, and we're going to have a lot of fun. Jeremy.
Greatest day in history. Death is beaten, you have rescued me. Sing it out, Jesus is alive. The empty cross, the empty grave, life eternal, you have won the day.
Get it ready.
Shout it out, Jesus is alive.
All right, let's do it. Confetti powers in this moment.
He's alive.
Yeah.
Oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Forever I am changed.
All right, dance with us.
When I'm standing in that place, free and last meeting face to face, I'm yours, Jesus, you are mine. And this joy and perfect peace, earthly pain will finally cease. Celebrate, Jesus is alive.
Shout it out,
He's alive. And oh, happy day, you wash my sin away. Oh, happy day, I'll never be the same. Forever I'm changed.
And oh, everybody get really low. What a glorious day.
What
a glorious way. All right, jump with me. Everybody jump.
that you have saved me.
And oh, what a glorious day. What a glorious day.